The quiet confession. The night was calm, the kind that hides a storm beneath silence. Keanu Reeves sat by his window, the faint hum of Los Angeles whispering in the distance. Rain began to fall, soft and steady, tapping gently on the glass as if asking him to listen. It was on nights like this that Keanu thought about things he never said out loud. About love, about marriage, about why he had never walked that path even when the world kept asking why. He wasn't afraid of love. He had loved deeply, too deeply perhaps. But love had always arrived wrapped in loss for him. His mind wandered to Jennifer, to the daughter he never got to hold, to the quiet ache that never left. People saw the calm face, the steady smile, but not the quiet tears that hid beneath the stillness. And tonight he was tired of pretending that silence was strength. His phone buzzed softly on the table. One message, from Sandra Bullock. "Hey, are you awake?" He smiled faintly. Sandra always had a way of reaching out at the exact moment his thoughts began to sink too deep. They had been friends for decades, ever since Speed, that chaotic film set that somehow gave them both peace in each other's company. She was light where he was shadow, laughter where he was quiet. But even she had never heard him speak openly about marriage. He typed back, "Yeah, can't sleep." "What about you?" Within seconds, her reply came, "Same, maybe we both need to talk." They agreed to meet at a small diner they both loved, an old place tucked away near the hills where fame had no meaning and peace felt real. When Keanu arrived, Sandra was already there, her hair tied back, a gentle smile hiding behind tired eyes. She looked at him like she always did, not as a star, not as a legend, but as a man still figuring life out. "So," she said softly, stirring her tea, "you ever think about it? Marriage, I mean." Keanu looked at her for a long moment before answering. "All the time. But not the way people think." Sandra leaned closer, sensing this wasn't one of his usual quiet replies. "What do you mean?" Keanu took a slow breath. "People think marriage is about forever, about having someone beside you every morning. But I see it differently. I think real love doesn't need papers or promises. It's about how deeply you respect someone even when you can't hold them." Sandra stared at him, silent. His words felt heavier than the rain outside. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "I've seen what loss does. I've seen how love can end without warning. So I guess I chose to stay unattached. Not because I don't believe in love, but because I don't want to break someone's heart the way mine was broken." For a moment, neither spoke. The diner grew quieter. Only the faint sound of the rain filled the silence between them. Then Sandra whispered, "Keanu, do you ever think that maybe love is still waiting for you? Maybe it's closer than you think?" Keanu looked at her eyes, searching for meaning. There was something different in her tone, soft, uncertain, almost trembling. He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in him hesitated. The air felt heavier now, filled with emotions neither of them dared to name. Then she smiled, breaking the tension. "You know what I think?" she said, her eyes glinting with warmth. "I think the world calls you lonely because they can't understand peace." Keanu smiled faintly, his gaze drifting toward the window. "And you?" he asked. "Do you ever think about marriage?" Her smile faded a little. "I did," she said quietly. "Once, maybe twice, but the timing was always wrong. Or maybe the person was." Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding that perhaps their stories had always been running parallel, waiting for the right moment to meet. The waitress came over, refilled their cups, and left without interrupting the fragile peace that had formed between them. "You know," Sandra said softly, "people always think of us as, what's the word? The ones who never happened." Keanu chuckled softly. "Yeah, I've read that too." "Maybe," she said, eyes lowering. "They're not completely wrong." Keanu looked at her again, more deeply this time. And for the first time in years, something shifted inside him, a thought he had buried long ago, a thought he didn't want to lose. The rain stopped. Dawn began to rise in the distance, painting soft gold across the clouds. Sandra leaned her head slightly against the window, her reflection merging with the light. Keanu quietly paid the bill and stood to leave. But before he could step away, Sandra reached for his hand. "You said love doesn't need promises," she whispered. "But maybe it still deserves a chance." Keanu froze. Her hand was warm, trembling slightly. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. Instead, he smiled faintly. "Maybe," he said softly. "Maybe it does." As he walked out into the morning light, Sandra watched him go, her heart torn between peace and confusion. She didn't know it yet, but that single conversation would soon change everything, because in the days that followed, a secret from Keanu's past would come to light, and what Sandra would do next would shock everyone who ever believed their story had ended years ago. The secret letter. The morning after their quiet talk, Keanu woke earlier than usual. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the floor. He sat still for a long time, thinking about Sandra's words from the night before. Maybe love still deserves a chance. It wasn't what she said that stayed with him. It was how she said it, like she wasn't talking about love in general. Like she was talking about them. He walked to his desk, opened a small wooden drawer, and took out an old envelope. Its edges were worn, and the paper had yellowed slightly with time. He hesitated for a moment before sliding it open. Inside was a letter, written years ago, addressed but never sent. The name on it was Sandra. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper. He had written it after filming The Lake House, back when the chemistry between them had been so real it scared him. He never mailed it because he thought she deserved peace, not confusion. But now, reading his own words after so many years, he felt that familiar ache return. The letter began. "Dear Sandra, I once read that some souls meet too early, and they spend the rest of their lives learning when the right time might come again. Maybe that's us." Keanu stopped reading. His throat tightened. He placed the letter back in the drawer, but this time he didn't lock it away. For the first time, he wanted to face the past instead of hiding from it. Meanwhile, across the city, Sandra sat in her backyard, a mug of coffee warming her hands. Her assistant had dropped off the morning papers, and as always, her face was printed on one of them. "Rumors about Bullock and Reeves rekindle speculation," it read. She sighed, folded the paper shut, and smiled softly. "They never stop guessing," she whispered. But deep down, she couldn't deny that something had changed last night. Keanu's honesty had left her shaken, not because it was painful, but because it was real. Later that afternoon, Sandra found herself driving aimlessly through Los Angeles. The sky was turning orange, the city glowing under the sunset. Her mind replayed every word Keanu had said. The stillness in his eyes, the weight behind his silence, and then, without really planning it, she turned onto a familiar street, one that led to Keanu's small house tucked behind tall trees. She parked a little distance away and sat quietly in the car, debating whether to knock. It had been years since she'd just shown up, but her heart told her to. When Keanu opened the door, surprise flickered across his face, then softened into a smile. "You found me again," he said gently. "You didn't exactly hide well," she joked, though her voice trembled slightly. He motioned for her to come in. The place was simple. A small piano, shelves filled with books, a few pictures of motorcycles, and one of his late partner. There was a quiet stillness in the room, the kind that felt both peaceful and heavy. "I wanted to talk," Sandra said, her tone more serious now. "Last night felt unfinished." Keanu nodded slowly. "I know. I've been thinking about it, too." There was a pause. Then she looked around, her gaze landing on the wooden drawer slightly open on the desk. "What's that?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "A letter," he said finally. "One I wrote years ago. To you." Sandra's breath caught. "You wrote me a letter?" "Yeah," he said, a faint smile crossing his lips. "But I never sent it. I didn't know what it would change. Maybe I was scared it might change everything." She stepped closer, her voice a whisper now. "Can I read it?" Keanu hesitated again, then nodded. He took the letter from the drawer and handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the words. The more she read, the quieter she became. Her hands trembled by the last line. "If fate ever gives us one more scene together." I hope this time I don't waste it." She looked up at him, eyes glossy. "Keanu, why didn't you tell me?" He looked down, his voice barely audible. "Because I thought you were happier without the weight of what-ifs. You had your life, your family, your peace. I didn't want to take that away." Sandra took a slow step forward. "You didn't take anything away. You gave me something I never forgot. Hope." He met her gaze, uncertain but drawn in. "Hope? Yes," she said softly. "You reminded me that love can still be kind even when it doesn't end with a wedding. You made me believe that goodness doesn't fade just because time passes." A quiet moment hung between them, thick with memories and emotions neither of them had dared to touch in years. Then suddenly, Sandra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a message from her publicist. "Tabloids have found out you met Keanu last night." "Headlines are coming," she sighed. Keanu noticed. "Trouble?" "Just noise," she said. "But maybe it's time we stop running from it." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said carefully, "maybe it's time we tell the truth." "Not for them. For us." Keanu shook his head gently. "The truth doesn't always need to be loud." "Maybe not," she replied. "But silence can also hurt." She walked toward the window, her reflection caught in the glass beside his. "You once told me real love doesn't need promises," she whispered. "Maybe that's true. But maybe real friendship doesn't need fear either." Keanu stayed quiet. His silence wasn't disagreement. It was the sound of someone realizing something he wasn't ready to admit. Then, from the table nearby, his old phone began to ring, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Hello?" A voice came through, hesitant, emotional. "Is this Mr. Reeves? I'm calling about something that belonged to your late partner. We found a recording addressed to you." His heart froze. The sound of her name, Jennifer, echoed through his memory. Sandra saw his face pale. "Keanu, what is it?" He looked at her, eyes wide, voice shaking. "It's from her. For the first time in years." Keanu felt the past reaching out again, and Sandra, standing beside him, realized that this phone call would change everything, because inside that recording was a message that would not only reveal his real feelings about marriage, but also uncover a truth that neither of them was prepared to face. And when Sandra finally heard it, what she said next would shock everyone. The lost recording, the air inside Keanu's home turned heavy after that phone call. It wasn't just a call. It was the sound of the past knocking after years of silence. He stood frozen, the phone still in his hand, as Sandra watched quietly. The name Jennifer echoed in both their minds. Keanu whispered softly. "They said they found a recording from her." Sandra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Where is it?" "They're sending it over," he said faintly. "They found it in an old storage locker, something connected to a charity she ran." His voice cracked at the end. They both sat down, neither speaking. Outside, the world was bright and alive, but inside that room, time had stopped. It took less than an hour for the email to arrive. One simple file attached. No context, no warning. Just the name. For Keanu. Keanu hesitated to press play. His hands trembled slightly. "What if this breaks me again?" he said quietly. Sandra replied gently, "Then I'll sit with you until it doesn't." He looked at her. Her voice was steady, calm, and warm, the kind of warmth that could hold brokenness without trying to fix it. Slowly he pressed play. A soft static sound filled the room. Then came a voice, gentle, familiar, full of life. "Hi, Keanu. If you're hearing this, it means time has passed. Maybe too much. I didn't want to leave without saying what I never had the courage to say." Sandra's eyes welled up instantly. Keanu's breath caught in his throat. The voice continued. "You always believed love meant pain. You were wrong. Love means peace. And someday when you meet someone who looks at you with patience, don't walk away because you're scared. Stay. Because that person will be the one who brings you home." The recording ended there, only a few minutes long, but it felt eternal. Silence filled the space after it ended. Keanu couldn't move. He just sat there, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. Sandra moved closer. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand and held it quietly. Minutes passed before he finally looked up. "She always knew what to say," he whispered. "And she still does," Sandra replied softly. "Maybe that message wasn't to break you. Maybe it was to set you free." Keanu turned to her slowly. His eyes were red, his expression distant. "Free for what?" "For the chance you've been avoiding," she said gently. "The one you talked about last night. The one that still deserves a chance." Her words hung between them, soft but sharp. Keanu didn't answer, but something shifted in his gaze. A small spark, fragile yet real, appeared behind his tired eyes. He stood and walked toward the window. Sunlight was falling through the glass, lighting up dust particles like tiny stars. "It's strange," he murmured. "You spend years running from the past, and one small voice can make you stop completely." Sandra joined him near the window. "Maybe that's what it means to heal. Not to forget, but to finally stop running." Keanu turned his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure I remember how to stay," Sandra smiled gently. "Then let me remind you." There was a long pause. Then Keanu asked quietly, "Do you believe people can fall in love twice?" Sandra looked at him thoughtfully. "I think love never really dies. It just changes its shape until it finds a way back to you." He didn't speak after that. He just nodded slowly, letting her words sink into the quiet that followed. The next day, Sandra was back on a movie set. Cameras, lights, and voices filled the air. But her mind wasn't there. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Keanu. She had seen something in him that morning. A glimpse of vulnerability she hadn't seen since they were young actors, just trying to figure out life. During a break, she checked her phone. A new message from Keanu. "Thank you for yesterday, for being there. I want to show you something tomorrow. No emojis, no explanation. Just a simple line." But it made her heart skip. She smiled softly and replied, "Okay, tomorrow." The next afternoon, Keanu drove her to a quiet place outside the city. It was a small field with tall grass swaying under a gentle wind. In the distance stood a half-finished wooden cabin. She looked around curiously. "What is this?" she asked. Keanu smiled faintly. "A project I started years ago. I was going to finish it for Jennifer, but I never could. Every time I tried, something stopped me." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "But yesterday, after hearing her voice, I think she'd want me to finish it now." Sandra walked slowly through the open doorway. Dust floated in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It feels peaceful." "That's what it's supposed to be," Keanu said. "A place for peace, not memories of pain." As they walked inside, Sandra noticed something etched into one of the wooden beams. It was faint, carved by hand. "For the one who teaches me to stay." She turned to him. "You wrote this?" He nodded, smiling shyly. "A long time ago." Sandra traced the letters gently with her fingers. "Then maybe it's time to finish it." They spent the next few hours working together, sweeping dust, fixing loose boards, laughing quietly when the hammer slipped or the wind blew their papers away. It felt almost ordinary, almost like they were just two people trying to build something new out of old pieces. As evening fell, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset stretch across the sky. Keanu leaned back, his eyes following the horizon. "You know," he said softly, "I've spent so long being afraid to love again. Afraid that it meant betraying what I lost. But maybe love isn't about replacing someone. Maybe it's about continuing what they taught you." Sandra smiled faintly. "And what did she teach you?" "That love isn't about forever," he said. "It's about being brave enough to care again." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying their silence like music. Then Sandra said something that made him turn toward her completely. "Maybe she was right," she whispered. "Maybe the one who'll bring you home isn't far anymore." Keanu's eyes softened. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, something deep and quiet passed between them. Something neither fame nor years could take away. And yet, what neither of them knew was that this peace wouldn't last long, because the world was about to find out about the recording. And when the headlines broke, the calm they built together would shatter into chaos. And in the middle of it all, Sandra would make a choice that no one expected. a choice that would reveal her real feelings at last. The storm of truth. The morning started with sunlight, but by noon, the world around Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had turned into noise, flashing cameras, endless phone calls, and words that neither of them ever said, printed across every screen. Keanu's late partner's message rekindles secret love. Sandra Bullock admits feelings after decades of silence. Recording reveals emotional confession. Hollywood reacts. Keanu's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Every network wanted an interview. Every fan account was posting theories. Someone had leaked the recording, the one meant to stay between him, Sandra, and the past. He sat quietly on his balcony, ignoring the chaos around him. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and thunder rumbled softly in the distance. The storm matched his mind. His doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks, then silence. He didn't have to guess who it was. When he opened the door, Sandra stood there, her expression calm but her eyes full of concern. "They got it," she said softly. "The whole recording?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Are you okay?" He gave a half smile. "Define okay," she sighed and sat down beside him. "I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen." "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said gently. "It's just the world being what it is, always looking for drama where there was only peace." Sandra looked at him quietly. "Peace doesn't sell stories, Keanu. Heartbreak does." The silence between them grew heavier. Outside, the wind picked up, bending the trees. A storm was approaching, both outside and inside their lives. "Do you regret it?" she asked after a while. He looked at her, puzzled. "Regret what?" "Telling me. Letting me in again." Keanu shook his head slowly. "No. I think the truth has been waiting too long. I just wish the world wasn't so loud about it." Her gaze softened. "The world doesn't know the whole truth. Maybe it's better if it never does." "Maybe," she whispered. "But sometimes silence looks like shame, and I don't want that for you." Keanu turned toward her. "You don't owe me protection, Sandra." "It's not about owing," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about care and respect." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Respect gets lost in noise." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "Then maybe it's time we speak our own version before others write it for us." By evening, they sat together in a quiet studio Keanu trusted. No reporters, no crew, just a single camera. He didn't want to record for the world, but for clarity, for truth. Sandra helped him set up the mic, her fingers brushing his once in a while. There was a tension, not of discomfort, but of emotion too deep to explain. Keanu sat before the camera and took a slow breath. "I'm not here to defend anything," he began softly. "I just want to speak honestly. That recording wasn't meant to be shared. It was personal. It was a goodbye message from someone I loved deeply long ago. She reminded me that love doesn't die. It just changes form. And maybe that message reached me when I was finally ready to hear it." He paused, his eyes lowering. "The person who stood beside me when I heard it was a friend who's been there since the beginning, someone I've always respected beyond words." Sandra stood behind the camera, silent, her eyes wet but proud. Keanu continued. "The media wants to turn this into a love story, a headline. But what it really is a story of 2 people who learned that kindness, patience, and respect can last longer than fame ever will." He stopped the recording there, turned off the camera, and exhaled deeply. "That's enough," he whispered. But Sandra stepped closer, her voice soft. "No, it's not." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You spoke your truth," she said. "Now let me speak mine." Before he could respond, she switched the camera back on and sat beside him. The room fell silent again. Then, with a calm, steady tone, Sandra began to speak. "People think they know everything about us," she said. "But what they don't see are the years between the headlines. The quiet nights, the real conversations, the shared pain, the unspoken support. Keanu has always been someone who gives more than he takes. I've seen him help people who never knew it was him. I've seen him carry grief with grace. And now, after all these years, I just want to say something I never said out loud. I admire him more than anyone I've ever met." She paused, her voice cracking slightly. "And maybe, yes, I loved him once. Maybe I still do. In a way that isn't about romance or movies, but about souls that understand each other." Keanu's eyes widened slightly. The room felt still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Sandra continued, tears forming. "This isn't about fairy tales or happy endings. It's about real human connection, the kind that survives distance, time, and pain. The kind that doesn't need labels." She ended the recording there, pressing the button with shaking fingers. The silence that followed was heavy but peaceful. Keanu reached out, placing his hand over hers. "You didn't have to say that," he whispered. "I did," she said softly, "because the truth deserves light. And because people need to see that love doesn't always mean forever. Sometimes it just means care that never fades." The next morning, they uploaded the video on a small private channel. No studio promotion, no media push, just honesty. Within hours, it spread across the world. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Comments poured in. "This is what respect looks like. For once, Hollywood showed humanity. Keanu and Sandra, proof that kindness still exists." The world fell silent, not in judgment but in awe. But even as peace returned, a new surprise waited, one that neither of them saw coming. A small letter arrived at Sandra's doorstep, sealed with an unfamiliar emblem. Inside was a note written by Jennifer's sister, who had seen the video. The note read, "Keanu was never meant to receive only one recording. There's another message, one that mentions you, Sandra." Her hands froze. Her heart began to race, because that meant the story wasn't over. Somewhere out there was a message connecting all three of them. The past, the present, and the truth that would finally reveal why Jennifer's last words had been about the one who would bring him home. And when Sandra would play that second recording, what she heard would change everything they thought they understood about love, loss, and fate. The second message, the world had calmed, at least on the surface. After the emotional storm that followed their video, Keanu and Sandra finally found a fragile kind of peace. Their truth had reached millions, not through drama, but through honesty. Yet, just as life began to feel normal again, a letter arrived that reopened every door they thought they had closed. It came in a small, cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered by a quiet courier. No return address, only a symbol embossed on the back. A small bird with open wings. Sandra turned it over in her hands as the sunlight hit the seal. Something about it felt deliberate, almost sacred. She carefully opened it and began to read. "Dear Sandra, this might sound strange, but my name is Clara. I'm Jennifer's sister. Years ago, while sorting through her things, I found several recordings she made during her treatment. One of them was clearly meant for Keanu, and another, I believe, was meant for you. She mentioned your name in it, and she asked that it only be given when the time was right. I think that time has come." The note ended with a short line. She wanted both of you to hear it together. Sandra's fingers trembled slightly. She read the letter twice, her heart beating faster with each line. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper. An emotion she couldn't yet name. She immediately called Keanu. He picked up after the first ring. "Hey," his calm voice said. "Keanu," she began, "you need to come over, now. There's something you have to hear." He could tell from her tone that this wasn't casual. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Keanu arrived, Sandra was already sitting in her living room with her laptop open. A file had been sent by email with the subject line, "For both of you," from her. The air felt thick with anticipation. Keanu's eyes met hers, quietly asking if she was ready. "You sure about this?" he asked softly. "No," she said truthfully, "but maybe that's the point." He gave a small nod. "Then let's listen." She pressed play. At first there was silence, then that same gentle voice filled the room. Jennifer's voice. Soft. Steady. Impossibly alive. "Hi, Sandra." "Hi, Keanu. If you're hearing this, it means life kept going. And I'm glad." I've thought a lot about both of you. I know it sounds odd, but in a strange way, you two were connected even before you realized it. Keanu's hand went still on the couch. Sandra's eyes widened slightly, her heart caught between awe and confusion. Sandra, the voice continued, you once visited the hospice where I volunteered years before we met on set. You spoke to a young woman who was afraid to face her diagnosis. You told her, fear is not the opposite of hope. It's proof that we still want to live. I never forgot that. That woman was me, Sandra gasped quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. She remembered that day vaguely, a visit she had made between film shoots just to meet patients who loved movies. She never knew that one of them would be connected to Keanu's life forever. The recording went on. When I met Keanu, I didn't tell him at first. I wanted to see who he was beyond the fame. And I saw something in him, the same peace you carried that day. You both share that rare kind of goodness that doesn't fade, even when life hurts. So if someday the two of you find your paths crossing again, don't see it as coincidence. See it as continuity. The audio crackled softly, then her voice grew more emotional. Keanu, I want you to know something. Loving me was not meant to be your ending. It was meant to be your beginning. And Sandra, if you're near him, please remind him that love can heal too, not just hurt. And then, with a gentle laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, she added, and if the two of you ever build something together, maybe finish that cabin he started. He always said it needed light. You were always the light. The recording ended with quiet static. Keanu sat motionless. Tears slowly traced down his face. Sandra covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God." Neither spoke for several minutes. The weight of what they'd just heard was too real, too personal. Finally, Sandra broke the silence. She knew me all this time, and she connected us before we even understood it. Keanu nodded slowly, his voice rough. She was always like that. She saw things before anyone else did. I didn't know she met you. She never told me. Maybe she didn't want to make it heavy, Sandra whispered. Maybe she wanted you to find it naturally. Keanu looked out the window. The afternoon light was soft, filtering through the trees. She always believed in signs, he said. And maybe this is one. A sign for what? He turned toward her. To stop being afraid. To stop pretending that care has limits. Sandra looked at him, her eyes reflecting both confusion and tenderness. Keanu, what are you saying? I don't know yet, he said quietly. But I think I need to go back there. To the cabin? He nodded. To finish it. She said it needed light. Maybe that's where everything ends. Or maybe where it finally begins. A few days later, they drove out together to the cabin once more. The sun was setting behind the hills, turning the sky into soft gold and pink. Birds moved lazily above the trees. Everything felt timeless. They carried boxes of tools, paint, and an old speaker to play music while they worked. Sandra laughed as she tried to hammer a nail, only for it to bend sideways. Keanu chuckled quietly. Some things never change, he said. Yeah, she replied. Like you trying to fix everything yourself. And you trying to prove you can do it better, he teased back. For the first time in years, they laughed freely. Not as actors, not as icons, but as two people simply building something together. As twilight fell, they lit a small lantern inside the cabin. The soft glow filled the unfinished room, casting golden reflections on the wood. Sandra looked around and whispered, She was right. It needed light. Keanu turned toward her. His eyes held gratitude and grief, but also something deeper, something calm and full. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For being here. For staying, she smiled. You don't have to thank me for that. He took a breath as if steadying himself. Sandra, I think maybe I was wrong about love. Maybe it's not about fear or loss. Maybe it's about courage. The courage to try again, even when you've seen how much it can hurt. She listened, her heart tightening. And what if it hurts again? Then at least it meant something, he said quietly. At least it wasn't silence. The wind outside grew gentler. The lantern flickered softly. They sat together on the wooden floor, their shoulders touching lightly. No words followed for a long time. In that moment, the silence wasn't emptiness. It was peace. the kind of peace that comes after truth. When they finally stepped outside, the stars had appeared. Sandra looked up and smiled faintly. "Do you ever think she can see us?" Keanu looked toward the sky. "Maybe she doesn't need to," he said. "Maybe she's just here." As they stood there, the breeze carried a faint sound, the quiet chime of a small bell. Sandra turned toward the cabin door and froze. Hanging from one of the beams was a wind chime neither of them remembered placing there. Etched into the metal were the words, "Every ending is a doorway." Keanu stared at it, his eyes wide with emotion. "That wasn't here before," Sandra's voice trembled. "Then maybe we just opened the door." They didn't know who placed it there or how it appeared, but both of them knew it wasn't random. It was a sign, not from the past but for the future. And that night, under the quiet blanket of stars, both of them finally understood what Jennifer's message truly meant. It wasn't about love lost. It was about love transformed, about kindness passed from one heart to another like a flame that never dies. But the world wasn't done with them yet, because when a photo of them at the cabin surfaced the next day, the internet exploded once more, and this time, what Sandra chose to say in response would silence the noise forever. When silence became love, by the time dawn rose over Los Angeles, the world had already begun to buzz again. The photo had gone viral overnight. A candid image of Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock standing outside the cabin, a soft lantern glow behind them. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, and she was looking up at him with a quiet, unguarded smile. The tabloids called it the moment Hollywood's most patient love story finally found its ending. News anchors spoke of it like a fairy tale. Fans wrote thousands of comments, guessing, hoping, arguing. But for Keanu and Sandra, it wasn't a story. It was just life, quiet, fragile, and real. When Sandra woke up that morning, her phone was full of messages. Agents, journalists, friends, even strangers writing long paragraphs about love, fate, and healing. But one message stood out. It was from Keanu. They turned a moment of peace into noise again. "Meet me at the cabin tonight. We need to finish what we started." She smiled faintly, typed back, "I'll bring dinner and calm hearts." The evening air at the cabin was soft and golden. Sandra arrived just as the sun began to dip, carrying a basket with food and 2 mugs. She found Keanu sitting on the porch, guitar resting beside him, lost in thought. "You didn't have to cook," he said as she walked up the steps. "I didn't," she replied, grinning. "I bought it. But I'll still take credit." He laughed softly, that rare laugh that came from somewhere deep, the kind that erased years from his face. They sat together as the sky turned from orange to violet. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, like a heartbeat. "I thought about deleting everything," Keanu said suddenly. "The videos, the interviews, even my phone. Just disappearing again." Sandra turned to him. "And why didn't you?" He looked down, then smiled faintly. "Because someone reminded me that silence isn't strength when it hides truth." She nodded quietly. "Then let's tell the truth. Right now. To ourselves," Keanu met her gaze. "What truth?" "That we're both tired of pretending we don't care," she said softly. "That we keep calling it friendship because we're afraid of what the world will say if it's more." He didn't move for a long time. The air felt still, waiting. Then he whispered, "I used to think loving again would mean betraying what I lost. But now, I think not loving again would be the betrayal." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "Then stop holding it back, Keanu. Stop protecting the pain." He reached for her hand slowly, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. Their fingers intertwined, hesitant at first, then sure. "You said once that love deserves a chance," he murmured. "Maybe you were right." She smiled through tears. "I know I was right." They sat like that for a long time. 2 people who had spent decades circling the same feeling, finally allowing themselves to stand still inside it. As darkness settled, they lit the lantern inside the cabin, the same one that had hung by the window since the night they finished building it. Soft golden light filled the room, reflecting off the wooden walls they had painted together. On one of the beams, The carving still stood. For the one who teaches me to stay. Sandra ran her fingers over the words. You wrote this years ago, she said quietly. And somehow, I think you finally did stay. Keanu looked around the cabin, the light, the stillness, the woman beside him, and smiled gently. Yeah, I think I did. They opened the last box of Jennifer's things that Clara had sent them. Inside was a small folded note neither of them had noticed before. It wasn't labeled, but the handwriting was familiar. Sandra unfolded it carefully. The message was short, written in graceful letters. If this place ever finds its light, then so have you. Don't spend your life mourning what you lost. Spend it protecting what you find. There was no signature, but both of them knew whose hand had written it. Sandra whispered, She gave you permission to live again. Keanu's voice was soft. No, she gave us permission. They sat together, the candlelight flickering across their faces, and for the first time in years, Keanu didn't feel haunted. The pain was still there. Grief never leaves completely, but now it had shape, warmth, and purpose. He turned to Sandra. Do you think people ever stop running from what they deserve? She smiled faintly. Only when they stop being afraid of being happy. He looked at her for a long moment, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then, softly, You make me want to stay happy. Her voice trembled. Then stay, and he did. Weeks passed. The world slowly grew quiet again. Interviews stopped. The photo faded from headlines. What remained were small things. Laughter over coffee, messages in the middle of the night, shared silence that didn't hurt anymore. The cabin became their secret place, not a shrine to the past, but a promise to the present. They hosted small gatherings there, sometimes inviting children from local schools for art and writing workshops. The cabin that once stood unfinished now glowed with life, filled with voices, drawings, and music. And one evening, as the sky turned gold again, Sandra stood outside watching the wind chime by the porch. It swayed gently, the soft bell sound echoing across the field. Keanu came up behind her, holding 2 mugs of tea. The sound always reminds me of her, he said. Me too, she whispered. But it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels like she's watching and smiling. He handed her the mug, and they stood quietly, looking out toward the horizon. Then Sandra said something that made his chest tighten. You know, she began softly, you once said love doesn't need papers or promises. But maybe it does need something. Not a vow, not a ring. Just a shared peace. He smiled, setting his mug down. Then we already have that. She turned toward him, eyes glistening in the fading light. Then promise me one thing. What's that? If ever the world turns loud again, promise we'll return here, to the silence, to the light. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. I promise. The sun dipped lower, the world glowing one last time before night. The wind chime sang again, its notes soft and lingering, as if carrying blessings through the air, and for the first time in his life, Keanu Reeves felt completely at peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because kindness had filled its place. The headlines would fade, the cameras would move on. But somewhere far from the noise, in a quiet cabin filled with laughter and light, 2 souls who had waited too long finally stopped waiting. They didn't call it love. They didn't need to, because what they had was something stronger, a silence that spoke everything love ever meant.